Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Beep beep and toot toot. Hey y'all, it's me, Bus Driver, and welcome back to Hot or Hot. And today we're finding ourselves over halfway through RuPaul's Drag Race UK Series 7, and I thought we'd do a little check-in because the reviews are in, and this season is flopping hard. At least according to fan ratings on IMDb, where we can see in this graph, fans have rated just one episode from season 7 above a 7 out of 10, which was episode 2's design challenge, and multiple episodes currently have IMDb rating scores below 6, which, as we can see when compared episode by episode to prior series of Drag Race UK, we can see is, well, really bad. And the average episode rating for this whole season, as of the time I'm recording this video, is currently 5.97, the lowest of any Drag Race UK series. And fan sentiment about this season isn't great in online discussion forums like Reddit either, where across the Drag Race subreddits we see people asking questions like, what's making UK season 7 so hard to watch? And is it the lack of Northern Queens that's making season 7 feel a bit flat? And this one asking, is it me or is season 7 the weakest UK season so far? And while I haven't been doing my normal episodic hot or rot reviews of this season, trust and believe I have been keeping up with it over on my Patreon, linked below, where I've uploaded reactions to every episode so far. And I have some thoughts. I think fans are really unhappy with this season for two major reasons. Firstly, there's a lack of compelling storytelling causing a disconnect between the audience and the queens. And secondly, this season has had some wildly inconsistent judging, leading to disappointing elimination after disappointing elimination. And basically, my take on why this season is being perceived as weak by the fan base is not because of the talent in the cast, but rather how that talent's being showcased or not showcased by the producers. So we'll be going through the episodes of this season thus far to discuss what's not working and evaluating if their IMDb ratings so far are fair. Plus, I'll be highlighting some of the genuinely great moments from the season so far, because truly, season 7 is not as bad as people online may be leading you to think. Let's get into it. But first, my sneaky snooper senses are tingling, which must mean someone watching this video isn't connected to a VPN. But guess what, Mimi? When you're browsing the old internet without a VPN, you run the risk of leaving all of your internet browsing activity exposed to sneaky snoopers on public Wi-Fi and even your internet service provider. But have no fear, the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN, is here. In just one click, Surfshark can help keep you and all of your sensitive information safe by encrypting and anonymizing all of your internet activity in a VPN tunnel. And Surfshark makes the internet easier to use with features like Clean Web that gets rid of all those annoying cookie pop-ups. Oh, and did you know Surfshark can also help you virtually change your location, which can help you unlock geo-restricted content on streaming platforms like every season of RuPaul's Drag Race. Yes, God! Plus, Surfshark can help you avoid price discrimination when shopping online for things like airline tickets and hotels. And one more thing, Surfshark can be used on all of your devices with unlimited device login. So what are you waiting for? Unblock the internet and secure your privacy today by visiting surfshark.com/Bussy. And then make sure to use code Bussy at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark. Thanks Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. First up, we got the Brit Gala premiere, which has an IMDb score of 5.4. And y'all, I'll be honest, this episode was a doozy. It was a disaster from start to finish, from how we met the queens to how the challenge was set up to how the critiques and placements landed. One of the big storylines for this episode, and really the season as a whole, as we'll see, is about Bones being this London Soho it girl, my shit don't stink type of personality. The first thing we learn about Bones is that she loves to perform, and she says she produces some of the best shows in London. And then in a Regina George Mean Girls-esque edit, we then hear Chai T. Grande confirm in a confessional Bones is that girl. And then we hear Terrace tell Bones she knows her as the Queen of New Soho. We also learn Bones' drag family with previous Drag Race UK winner Crystal Versace and contestant Dee Delicious. And she does joke about being booked and busy, saying she has a reputation to uphold, but the thing is, I'm not really buying this storyline they're trying to sell us about Bones thinking she's better than the other girls. To me as a viewer, she comes off humble, poised, nice, and like a little reserved even. And this It Girl storyline for Bones carries past the entrances and even into the challenge of this episode, where when she's interviewed on the pink carpet of the Brit Gala, the MVQ interviewer asks her, how did you become the Queen of Soho? Where Bones simply replies, I worked hard. People gave me that title, I didn't give it to myself. Where she again comes off as humble and a little reserved. And it sucks that this interview thing she did just felt like the producers were trying to trap her in this box, instead of, I don't know, learning more about her other than she works in Soho. Another weird thing about this episode is Bones does really well well in this premiere, but doesn't ultimately place in the top, despite her 2 looks she served definitely being some of the best this week. And so Bones' placement this episode feels like a weird double whammy of the show wildly misrepresenting her personality while also failing to acknowledge how well she actually did. But honestly, that challenge was a mess across the board. And it wasn't just viewers like me who were kind of confused about what exactly the queens were supposed to be doing in the challenge. The queens themselves were apparently also pretty confused themselves. In a TikTok live, Katrin Feeling spilled some tea and said all the queens were completely confused by the first challenge, particularly because they couldn't see each other walk the red carpet. And I think because the goal of this challenge felt unclear, it made the placements this episode feel really confusing. Alvosk ends up getting the win because I guess she's able to navigate the interview question a little bit better than some of the other queens. But to me personally, I found her looks to be just safe, while other queens like Bones, Page 3, and even Sally maybe deserved higher or winning placements here. And the bottom placements here go to Pansy and Young Bella, but this doesn't even matter because of this episode's lucky cow twist. Cause y'all wanted a twist, eh? And y'all, this twist, I think, was one of the most poorly designed twists in the history of Drag Race. It involves the cast voting between the 3 bottom queens for who should receive the lucky cow, which means should the person that received the lucky cow have to lip sync and also lose, they will be saved from elimination. This, from my point of view, was essentially a twist designed to give the illusion of power to the queens, while ultimately just making sure the producers could pull the strings of how the episode proceeded any way they wanted. This whole lucky cow twist just felt like an unnecessary time waster because we could have spent valuable time here in the premiere getting to know some of our contestants better. And so yeah, this premiere of Series 7 did the girls dirty. The challenge was poorly designed, the twist was poorly designed, and there was no payoff from the storyline being built up around Bones. And moving in episode 2 of Series 7, we've got the design challenge, which is currently the highest rated episode of this series. And the challenge setup here is the queens are tasked to create an upcycled garments using materials left over from past seasons. And the big drama from this episode comes from Viola, who's upset at being voted most painful in the Superlatives mini challenge, which honestly she takes all too personally, but had I been in her shoes, I probably would have been feeling the same way. But we see her frustration with the painful voting thing come out time and time again in this episode, like when Ru does the workroom walkthrough, and we hear Viola telling Ru that despite having a degree in textiles, she won't be helping any of the other girls. And Viola does eventually kiss and make up with the other girls, where we get my favorite moment from this episode. People are crying, people are hugging, and then there's a shot of Young Bella working on her outfit, and then a confessional of her saying, "They're all crying, I don't know what's going on, but I have a lot of work to do, and you can't make a sweater out of tears." Iconic. But I'm mostly highlighting this Viola versus everyone's storyline to talk about how the majority of this episode is focused on this drama, again, instead of getting to know some of the queens a little bit better. Concerning the actual challenge from this episode, I think the judging was mostly correct. Sally Tiam definitely deserved the win with that picnic look. It was incredible, and maybe one of my favorite design challenge looks of all time. And it was nice to see Bones do so well in that pink bow Barbie doll look. However, we don't see the producers letting up on the Bones It Girl narrative storyline thing, because during critiques, RuPaul says to Bones, "Last week you were the queen of Soho and can't nobody touch you, but that's been dispelled this week." In the bottom though, we've got Pansy and Viola, where I think Pansy being in the bottom made sense. Her outfit had legs that were different lengths. The concept was kind of non-existent with it just being a green jumpsuit. Viola being here though kind of confused me because I liked her spider look. I did not think it was as bad as the judges made it out to be. And I thought it was really cool how she managed to build spider legs on the back of her dress that lifted up when she raised her arms. Plus head to toe, this was fully conceptualized. She had the spooky makeup, the spooky hair, and it just really confused me to see her here in the bottom. But I think her placement here more so reflected a desire of the producers to tell the overconfident queen lands herself in the bottom storyline that we have seen all too many times on Drag Race. Because we even see a critique from RuPaul where she tells Viola, "You told me you had a degree in textiles and I'm very disappointed." It all just felt a little too pointed at Viola for what I thought was no reason, but I'm sure the idea of putting Viola into the bottom here was just too juicy for the producers to ignore, considering she had already thrown a big fit and stirred the pot with the mini challenge drama. I've also got to call out that I think to emphasize how bad Viola's look was, they put her in the lineup right before Sally, which which does achieve two things. One being it makes Sally's look even better, and two being it makes Viola's look even worse. This lip sync though goes as expected, with Pansy being in the bottom for now the second time, and she's sent packing. And honestly, this episode was pretty good. There was drama, good looks, and a decent lip sync. And so I'd say the rating on IMDb for this episode is reflective of what happened. Next up though, we've got the Brat Girl Groups Challenge in episode 3, which is sitting with a 6.1 rating on IMDb. In this episode, the queens are split into groups and challenged to come up with lyrics and choreography for the new Brat-inspired hyperpop hit, She Ate That. And at the open of this episode, we are hit in the face yet again with the Bones storyline, where Bones says to the group she's thankful the judges are seeing her for who she is and is happy that she's moved past the bad first impression. However, Bones is also a huge focus this episode because the producers start to sell us this Bones versus Page 3 drama, which seems to bubble up because Bones and Page 3 find themselves as de facto team leaders of their respective groups because they've got the most choreographical experience. This episode is also interesting because we've got Patron Feelings catching feelings for Terrace Mongardi. And when I originally saw this, I thought the producers were trying to force another butt king on us, but these two do still seem to be posting content together post-show on places like Instagram and TikTok. And so maybe this isn't just a showmance, and if it's not, congratulations to them, but you know, you can't blame me for being a little skeptical. Anyway, the judging this episode is horrendous. And I think the main reason this episode is rated so low is because none of the critiques matched up with how they placed the queens. My personal standouts from group 1 were Terrace, who had a great line in her verse, "Ice in my veins bleed gold like medallion, ride like a horse, Terrace the stallion," and young Bella, who had my favorite one-liner of the night, "Think I'm fake? Wow, that's fantastic. I'm a doll, so duh, I'm plastic." And my standouts from group 2 were Bones, who did super well, and actually Chai T Grande, whose verse really gags me with the BKK via LDN on the BBC, it's me CTG. And so honestly, when the judges announced Page 3 and Bones as the top 2 of the week, I was half surprised because I thought there were clearly other better queens tonight, and half not surprised because we already saw them setting this top 2 up at the beginning of this episode with the fake rivalry. Bones though takes the win here, which is definitely justifiable, and she notably receives the "You're born to be on stage" compliment from RuPaul, there I think officially setting her up to be in the final 4. The bigger placement issue I had with the queens this week was actually in the bottoms, because we've got young Bella and Viola, which I found very odd considering what the judges said to them. During critiques, the judges gush over young Bella's lyrics, with everyone saying she did a great job in the challenge, and RuPaul even compliments her confidence. The only negatives we really hear in the final product of the episode are that the judges thought her runway look wasn't up to par with the rest. And we've also got Viola, who was told by RuPaul, "You were fantastic when you were front and center, but I lost you when it wasn't your turn." And where the other judges do all compliment her performance. Like, how is "you were great during your solo, but blended into the group during the group segment" a negative? But like young Bella, they do also rip into Viola's Five Nights at Freddy Cuddly Wuddly runway, which they basically said wasn't drag enough, which is a critique I can understand. But the bigger issue here is that the judges are using these runways to justify these queens having bottom placements in the girl group challenge. Make it make sense. It's also worth noting here that the metaphorical writing on the wall appears for Chai T Grande this week, because she gets the same critique as Viola, where she hears that she was great in the solo, but faded into the background during the group segments. Basically, I think the producers had young Bella and Viola marked as early outs, and they just wanted to use this week as an opportunity to justify putting them in the bottom with their runways. But with the looks they're wearing, we know immediately who's going home, because there's no way Viola is going to be able to give a compelling lip sync in the Five Nights at Freddy costume. And sure enough, she gets the chop, which I thought was fair considering young Bella did technically outperform her if she maybe didn't know all of her lyrics. And next up, can anybody tell me what day it is? Thursday. In episode 4, Sweety Darlings, which currently has a 5.3 score on IMDb, our queens were challenged to overact in Mother Tuckers, which are basically sketches involving an adult romance writer, a lot of rides, dealing with a younger romance writer wanting to be her. Anyways, this acting challenge was bad. And I think the producers and editors of the show even knew how bad it was because they took the liberty of adding what I'm pretty sure are RuPaul and Michelle and whoever else laugh tracks after every single line delivered by every single queen. And honestly, the laugh tracks were so distracting that during my reaction, I found it hard to even focus on what was being said because of the ha 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 every 3 seconds. Anyways, because this acting challenge was so bad, the placements this episode feel like yet another dice roll. So a big issue with this challenge was with the setup having 3 different groups essentially doing 3 different versions of the same scene. And Katrin, Elle, and Bonnie all take the same Lotta Rides role, but in my head, it was hard for me to distinguish between the 3, not only because, yes, their drag and sense of humor is a little similar, but because they're all dressed the same in these parts. But it wasn't just me confused by these 3 queens. People online have been talking about how these 3 queens are indistinguishable. And I'll acknowledge here, yes, these 3 queens do have a similar sense of humor and even similar style, where we can see as an example on this runway, any 3 of these queens could have worn any 3 of their looks and we would have believed that that was the runway they brought with them. However, I don't think it's fair to these queens to label them as the same. They are all very different, and I would say really it's an issue with the storytelling of this season that we can't, in our heads, better distinguish which queen is which. Because why are we 4 episodes in and giving a win to one of these queens, Bonnie, without learning more about her? Like, who is she and where is she in the confessionals? Anyways, Bonnie gets the win, sure, good for her. And the bottom placements, I think, were decided only half fairly. We got Young Bella, who at this point in the competition, it's very clear the judges don't see a future for on this season. She gets fairly critiqued for delivering her lines off camera, and as much as I didn't want to see her lip sync again, I think this was maybe the only fair time she was placed into the bottom. We've also got Select's Addiction here in the bottom, who confused me because we got another case of her critiques not matching her placement. We hear Alan say that he loved overacting with Celexa, and then Michelle saying, part of acting is listening to a director, and I think you did that. And then we've got the guest judge even saying, I think you were marvelous. But here she is in the bottom too. Make it make sense. Personally, I actually thought Sally was really lucky to be saved from the bottom here, because while she was funny in the acting challenge, she did get the "you were so bad that it became funny" critique, and she was very obviously stumbling over her lines. Anyways, this week's lip sync is kind of disappointing. Young Bella ends up kind of losing by default, as she very obviously doesn't know all of her words, even though I'd say she technically outperformed Celexa. But it is what it is, and Young Bella gets the chop, which, while yes, in the context of this episode did seem fair, definitely hurt because she was definitely my favorite queen of this season. I think she is a star. I think she has an amazing personality, and I can't wait to see what else she's gonna do with her platform now. But yeah, it sucked to see her go. But is this episode having the lowest score on IMDb fair? I'd say yes. The acting challenge was poorly designed, and we lost a fan favorite. This was an upsetting episode to watch. And next up, ahoy mateys, we've got a talent show. Episode 5 is currently sitting on IMDb with a rating of 5.7. And this episode features Lavoie from season 6 of Drag Race UK giving a pep talk in the workroom. And just to switch things up a little bit for this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about what each queen did in the talent show. I was up first with a parody of the original tracks that queens bring to Drag Race, which I thought was going to totally flop because the first half was weak and got no laughs. But it finally got funny when the original track chorus came in and she was like making fun of the dance moves and stuff. This was hot. Bones was next up, who brought an original track, which I've got to note was very shady of the producers to place right after Elle's talent where she made fun of original tracks, but the producers are going to be producing, that's their job. Anyways, Bones' original track was completely unintelligible. She was going for the robot auto-tune sound, but something about the audio quality was completely messed up. This was a rot. Next, we've got Sally, who is painting a picture of RuPaul while listening to an inner monologue of her thoughts spiraling into chaos. And I found this talent really funny, but in a different season where the queen's overall shows were better, she may have found herself in the bottom, because the visual performance of what she did just wasn't big enough, I think, for TV. Next up, we've got Celexa, who was a real surprise for me tonight. She did this like robot burlesque thing with really funny one-liners, like "how's my head?" breast and show. And I think this was hot. Her win this episode was definitely deserved. And next is Bonnie, who's doing a no talent performance where she kind of makes fun of the previous successful talents of the show, like jumping from there with the box, and where she also mentions Kyron Thrax's Susie. This was hot. And next we got Page 3, who's performing her original track, Pop My, which did also feature her doing some live singing in the first half. And I'll say, was this performance unique? No, but I did enjoy it, and I was really confused that the judges placed her near the bottom for this, because I thought this was hot. And next we've got Chai Tea Grande, who did a dumpling burlesque number, which I think could have been funny with the right setup, but as presented, it was just really bad. This was a rot. Then there's Catching Feelings, who's doing bad magic tricks, and I think this was actually one of the better performances of this talent show, because she's essentially doing a live performance of bad magic where primary focus is her being funny with what she's doing. And I think she was very successful in that. Plus, with her doing this audio live and not lip syncing, I think it showed off she's got a great knack for talking into a microphone and working a crowd. This was hot. And finally, the show ends with Terrace's watermelon song, which ends with her cracking a watermelon with her thighs. And I found this quite entertaining, definitely hot. I know I haven't talked a lot about runways, but this week is the oversized runway, and I think it's worth mentioning Select's Addiction and Sally TM had incredible looks here. But are y'all ready for a little bit of a gag here? Because I'm actually gonna be agreeing with the judges' placement decisions this week. Selexa was my personal pick for the win, and Chaiti Grande and Bones, I think objectively had the worst performances and did deserve their bottom 2 placements. Lip sync between them though is kind of weird. It's to the song Spectrum by Florence and Calvin Harris, and honestly it just kind of left me wanting more from both queens. I liked the witchiness Chai was bringing into the performance, and I felt her energy did match the track a little bit better, and by contrast Bones was more giving like a 1-2 tighter performance that I just thought didn't quite match the tone of the song. And I think overall this lip sync was a little disappointing considering the storyline setup we've had for Bones being this incredible performer, where in this lip sync she kind of just gives an okay performance. And so here this elimination was weird because I did kind of think Chai won the lip sync, but was I ready to say goodbye to Bones? No. And I think she did enough to justify staying. Overall though, I'd say the IMDb rating for this episode feels a little too low, and I think since the first half of the season was rated so low and was being received so poorly by the fans, we're starting to see like a pile-on effect happen here where the fans aren't going to be happy with anything they see. Because honestly, I thought this was a pretty good talent show and a pretty good runway. And if I were personally doing out of 10 scores for these episodes, I would have said this was like a 7 or an 8. And next up, original track. We've got episode 6, Peter Pansy the Rusical, which is currently sitting on IMDb with a score of 6.5. And y'all, I actually really enjoyed this Rusical. I thought there were some stellar performances from queens like Page 3 and Elle. And it was genuinely hard for me watching this to discern who was bad enough to be in the bottom 2. But before we talk placements and drama from this episode, I've got to call out some great runways from queens like Sally with that paper sketch pirate look, Selex's Verdigris warrior queen armor thing, and Elva's Celtic mythology warrior look, all of which were actually incredible and some of the best looks I think we've seen so far in the season. I will also take this opportunity here to talk about the 3 queens who all look alike because they all had a similar concept for their look, which was the Celtic warrior, and all wore red hair. And I just think these 3 queens all coming up with the same concept for the runway this week is not doing them any favors for the fans that think they're all the same person. And I also found it funny that Pansy, the other queen who was getting confused in this group of queens who all look the same, also planned to wear a similar look. In the workroom, we see Terrace bringing up to the other girls that she didn't get her pick for role in the Rusical, but ultimately does say it's okay when Selexa apologizes and other queens ask to confirm if she's happy with the role she got. Later though, Terrace brings up directly to RuPaul during the critiquing session that she felt she was unable to speak up, being the only person of color in the cast, and also being the only one who didn't get the part she wanted. And RuPaul's response to this is very flase-da. She sort of glazes over the inner turmoil Terrace is experiencing in her head and just tells her to speak up in the future. What I found more interesting though was what Terrace said about this conversation on Twitter after the episode aired. She wrote, "The misdirection and watering down of that conversation is kind of devastating," where we see Katrin Feelings in the reply saying, "It's actually really disappointing to see how much they left out. You made your feelings known and spoke about a very important thing about you and your life. It's a shame they left it out." And it is a shame that we missed an opportunity to hear more of Terrace's story, especially in a season that's suffering from an inability to tell the queen's stories. Anyways, concerning placements this episode, I think the judging was pretty spot on. However, the wins and elimination I think really soured what was a great episode, because the judges decided to award a shared win to Paige and Elle, which to me kind of felt like a backhanded compliment to Page 3, because like sure, Elle's voice and raw talent was incredible in this Rusical. I'm not gonna deny that. But I don't think her performance eclipsed Page 3's, whose performance as Peter Pansy was one of the best I think we've ever seen in a Rusical. She lit that stage up. And so to me, in hindsight, now knowing that Page 3 gets eliminated the next episode, I think the judges splitting the win here between Elle and Paige was more so them securing insurance on making sure another queen had a win at this point in the competition, because we are here at episode 6, and the most wins any one queen had was 1. And giving Elle her second win for the Rusical cements her as a front runner, while at the same time letting us kind of forget, you know, later down the line that Page 3 also had a win here. The bottom 2 from this Rusical, Sally and Terrace, I think were the appropriate bottom 2. Both were struggling with the choreography and at times messing up their words in the Rusical. And ultimately here we do see Sally eliminated as she fails to keep up with Terrace's amazing performance in this lip sync. But her elimination here felt devastating because she's one of the few queens who I think were really coming across on the season as relatable. And getting rid of a fan favorite always hurts, but I do think we also have to acknowledge fairly that she was kind of saved from the bottom two twice already, in my opinion, the talent show and girl group challenges. It also sucked to see a comedy queen go home right before the Snatch game. Overall though, this episode being the second highest rated of this season so far felt correct to me, and honestly I think the episode deserves a higher rating than 6.5, but again, I think we're at the point where the fans are just not going to be happy with almost anything they see in a season that they're disappointed with. But next up is the Snatch game, which currently has an IMDb score of 5.7, and this is another score that I think is kind of unfair, but there were some big issues I had with this episode. First up, the reading mini challenge was abysmal. The queens could not read to save their lives. Nobody brought their glasses, nobody brought their library cards, and getting through each queen's digs at the other girls was painful. The only one who was even remotely funny was Bones, who ends up winning the mini challenge, but after watching that lineup of flops, I was scared for what could happen in the Snatch game. Thankfully though, the queens did turn it around, and I think actually gave one of the better Snatch games in recent Drag Race history, but the change of format for the Snatch game was horrible. Instead of the typical Snatch game panel, we have the Snatch game set up like a dating show with celebrity Jordan North asking the panelists questions. And this Snatch game as a dating show concept is tried and true. It works well on the All Stars Snatch Game of Love, but I think it only works there because the panels are smaller, usually with like 3 or 4 queens. But in this Drag Race UK Series 7 Snatch Game panel, we've got the queens lined up side by side, where the distance between the two on the end basically guaranteed that they would never interact with each other. The other weird and annoying thing about this Snatch game was the whole turning on and turning off the lights thing Jordan was doing after each round of questions, where basically he had to go turn off the lights on queens who didn't turn him on. And I hated this not only because it was an awkward time waster, but also because it shifted the focus of the Snatch game away from the panelists answering the questions into this, sorry, but random celebrity playing with buttons. Like, what was that? Anyways, despite the format switch flop of this Snatch game, I will say there were several queens who gave really enjoyable performance. We had Elle Vosk doing a really sick and twisted JoJo Siwa, Patron Feelings as Bonnie Tyler, and of course, Bonnie and Clyde as Cher is a chair. And what was upsetting about the Snatch game though was who did so poorly, because we've got Bones and Page 3 just absolutely flopping. I don't think there was a single joke between the two told, and they weren't even so bad it's funny bad, they were just bad. But I am gonna go one more time in this video and say I do agree with the judges' placements here. The win goes to Bonnie for her portrayal of Chair, which was actually genius, and then the bottom two are Bones and Page 3, which is a really frustrating lip sync because Page 3 has been doing pretty great in the competition and is off the back of a win here in this episode. And while I do think based on the edit of this Snatch game that we saw, the bottom two is justifiable, it does make me wonder, was there maybe a bottom two edit for queens like Selexo or Terrace in this episode? Because we're looking at a bottom two of Bones and Page 3, which is a rivalry that was set up several episodes ago, and I can't help but acknowledge, I just know the producers were itching to get these two in a lip sync against each other. Unfortunately though, the lip sync showdown between Bones and Page 3 that the producers have been prepping us to see for the past couple of weeks just doesn't really pay off. Because honestly, the rivalry between these two feels a tad contrived, and sending Page 3 home here in this episode just sucks. Page 3 has been on the up and up, and Bones is here in the bottom now for the second time. As to who should have gone home from this lip sync though, a lot of people online are saying Bones. My opinion though is I think both queens gave really great performances, or at least the best they could to this slow groovy rock song, but I do think Page 3 failed to connect with the judges because of all the stuff on her face with the mustache and the hair and nonsense. And this was definitely one of those lip syncs that you watch and think after, wow, I wonder what the edit was hiding, because Page was killing it, and she even is on record saying she wishes that the edit showed more of her in the lip sync to justify her going home.
It may well have been completely justified, but I do feel I wish I'd seen myself in the lip sync a little bit more for it to justify she didn't win that.
And so overall, I'd say the Snatch game was pretty enjoyable between the 3 good performances, but the format change sucked, and losing Page 3 in this elimination sucked even harder. That's my final thoughts about this season so far. I feel like we're in such a strange place, both competitively and narratively, because I think judging for wins and eliminations has been pretty inconsistent across the previous episodes, and storylines for queens like Bones being a powerhouse of drag are falling completely flat as she fails to impress in some challenges like Snatch game. And for other queens queens' storylines are non-existent. Elle, Katrin, and Bonnie seem to evade any sort of vulnerability on camera. I don't know if they've got an unwillingness to share more, or if it is indeed just this season hiding their stories, and also stories like Terrace's, to focus on petty fake dramas like Page 3 versus Bones. Honestly, I think the cast in this season is very talented, but I do think they are a slightly more reserved and chill cast, which would have been fine if this season had just been focused on making a happy-go-lucky season, like season 14 of Drag Race. But instead, we just got all these storylines forced onto queens who are not living up to the expectations set by the show itself. So I'll say again, I don't think this season is all bad like people online may be wanting everyone to think. There have been some awesome moments in Snatch Game, the Rusical, the Design Challenge, and even the Girl Groups Challenge, which I really enjoyed. It's just that the meddling of producers, elimination of fan favorites, and failure to properly tell stories of these queens is kind of ruining the season. And I think another thing we can't overlook about this season is that it's off the back of one of the best, if not the best, Drag Race UK season ever, Series 6. And I think it's this combination of overproduction and fan expectation that is leading to a pile-on of really bad reviews in places like IMDb. But of course, I'd love to know what y'all are thinking about this season so far down in the comments below. And also be sure to let me know if you enjoyed this mid-season check-in and if you want me to do a finale review as well. Also, don't forget to check out today's video sponsor, Surfshark VPN, by visiting surfshark.com/Bussy. I've loved using Surfshark to help secure my online privacy for several years now, and I know you'll love it too. Plus, Surfshark offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in just trying it out. Lastly, I want to give an extra special shout out to my patrons who truly do make my channel possible, and I want to give an extra special shout out to Fatty, Maddie, Meg Fattyton, Felicia, Laura, Ashton, Matthew Burns, and Will and Tanner, who are all supporting me at my Bussy Queen Collector tier at patreon.com/BussyQueen. See y'all later. Love ya. Bye.